Here we go. So, welcome, Helen. I'm very happy that we took the time to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today.
Obviously, I think your story is really cool, and I think more people should hear it. So, I think the first thing is, who are you? What do you do? What's your background? What have you been working on in the last few years?
So I'm Helin Yontar. I'm from Turkey, Izmir, and I moved to Italy when I was 17 to study university there. And I graduated from International Relations and Global Affairs program of Università Cattolica. And I've been living in Milan ever since. And now I work for a digital social platform called Global AI Hub that is focused on AI data and robotics.
So, you switched from what do you study again in Cattolica University?
International Relations and Global Affairs.
From that to a company that works on AI education. How did you do that? Like, what inspired you to make this switch?
Well, when I was studying, international relations is such a multidisciplinary program. So you learn a little bit about law, a little bit about political affairs and international affairs. So I realized that in each topic, I was more focused on digital modern technologies. When we studied economy, I was more interested in digital economics, digital transformation of businesses. And when we did law, I was interested in datification of borders. So I did have this interest for technology, but I was never interested in statistics, and I did not want to learn how to code because I think my strength is human communication. So I wanted to be out there communicating with people working in that field. But then I was also super interested in it, and then I decided to do some more research. And when I was writing my thesis, I chose the topic of digital developments and the evolution of education, and I was looking for some kind of food for thought, some kind of source. And that's kind of when I decided to take AI expert because I was looking for some kind of source where I did not need to know how to code, but I could learn about AI and robotics and data and the importance of these concepts. And then I ended up working in this field.
So that's interesting to me because I think a lot of people that are curious about technology, they think that they need to get so much into it, right? They need to become data scientists. They need to know how to code. They need to do statistics. Do you know any of like do you know how to code? Did you ever get into that?
Yeah, actually, now I'm slightly more interested. I want to learn a little about Python maybe, but I don't see myself coding in front of the computer all day. I don't think that's my career path, but I don't think that's an obstacle to be in this field.
So what do you think are the important things then to be in that field? Like what are the skills that you really need to have that make you good at your job and that you think that other people would need to have in order to be successful? So first of all, maybe what is exactly that you do? Like tell me how do you spend your days? How do you what do you do
Oh, yeah.
exactly?
So I work as a global partnership specialist. So we have a non-profit project going on called the 10 Million AI to educate 10 million people globally until 2024. And I work for this project and I deal with the communication with our partners. If anyone is further interested, please go and check our website.
Yeah, we're gonna put links
Um,
in the description for sure.
exactly. So if I come to your question, I think the important thing is to understand how these technologies are a part of our daily lives. Everyone in their daily life right now is using AI somehow. It's like having an online meeting right now or using your smartphone, the app of Siri. Everyone is using it. We're just not aware of what it exactly is. Or when it comes to other modern technologies like RPA, when you say hyper automation, no one really can tell what it looks like. I think it's really important to be aware of these technologies because they have a huge impact in our lives. It has a huge impact in career opportunities for businesses, for anyone who is studying whatever subject. It is important in the following 5 years, especially. So I think that's the important part to know that there is a non technical area of these modern technologies and everyone can be involved in this. Also, a point that you always underline as well that we have to democratize these technologies because it's a tool that everyone can use and be really creative with. But to do that, people should first know what AI is and how it's used and what's the impact.
Absolutely. So that's how technology, the knowledge of technology helps you because you have this awareness, right? But how does your main background, So the stuff that you studied at Cattolica University, how does that help you instead? Because it sounds to me that it seems to me the most important thing is having both in the same head, basically. So is in finding the intersections between these two things. Can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, of course. I mean, as I said, when you talk about international relations, you learn about so many different areas of studies. So one of the things that we study a lot is political science and the ethical background, for example. And I realized that when we studied those topics, when I did my research, I was reading a lot about how modern technologies create new kind of concerns about fairness, for example. Like in ethics, there is this dilemma called the tram dilemma. It's I don't know if you heard of it. Have you?
Yeah, the you explain it. For once, I don't need to explain it. Somebody else is explaining for me. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's basically if there's a handle and you can change the train racks of a tram, you see two different paths, and on one path there is one, let's say, guy who is 60 years old and who's a doctor. On the other path, there are three kids who is going to die, and they didn't even study yet. I'm just making these examples up, but the main idea is if you had the chance to choose which one is gonna die, how would you do it? So, for example, that was a really interesting concept for me because you can't really decide. It's such a huge debate when it comes to ethics. But now, in today's world, when you think of automized, like autopilot cars, for example, if someone is going to have to code what's going to happen in a situation of an accident, and this car is going to have to decide, this car is going to have to become this handle and decide which road this car is going to take. So I think even in a topic like ethics that is seen as a really social subject, really non-technical subject, you see the importance of understanding these kind of technologies. So those kind of intersections really impress me. So I think that's how my background is really helping me in this field. I can make those connections in areas that looks irrelevant but actually is really relevant.
Yeah, whereas I think teaching international relations to a data scientist will be much harder than teaching concepts of AI to you, right? Who are an expert
Mm-hmm.
in that other side. Yeah, I always ask myself what is the best way to create this connection, because as you said before, I think the most important thing here is that technology is getting into a lot of different aspects of our lives, from the way that we drive our cars to the way that companies select candidates to the way the banks select who's going to get a loan or not. And the more technology gets embedded into different industries and different aspects of our lives, the more different people with different expertises they need to have a cooperation. um,
Exactly.
and so I always thought that the best way to make this cooperation happen is with people like you. So people that come from the application side, let's say, from the end user, let's say, of the technology, understand technology rather than teaching the data scientist. They like to code. They like to spend their days looking at a screen, and that's what they should do. I mean, at the end of the day, if that's what you wanted to do with your life, you should be able to do that.
Yeah. Another really important point that I wanted to mention, also in business, we see that. For example, when there's a new project that comes from the IT department that can maybe profit a lot for this company, a CEO, a manager has to understand how this project is going to work in order to approve that that's going to happen. So even these people who does not have a background in these topics, who are managers, CEOs, maybe marketing department or salespeople, everyone needs to have a basic knowledge at least, I think.
Yeah. From your experience, how broad is this knowledge? Like, do a lot of people understand technology, the people you work with, or you think that there's still a lot of need of pushing this knowledge and this awareness more into business people?
I think there is still the need to push the awareness a little bit because, unfortunately, as someone who was not in this field as well, I saw it in the same way. It looks like such an different area. You feel like you're supposed to become an astronaut if you know AI. Like it's really not that far from people actually, but it's really hard to get started once you have that idea because I mean, we can see it when we think of dystopian novels or movies. It's always this robots taking over the world. It's because people usually tend to fear what they don't know, and AI is that area that people don't know. So it seems really scary, but once you're in it, it's really impressive how much you can do with it. Like you can work on, I don't know, climate change, on wildfires, like really recent stuff that we see all over the world. I want to I want to know that there's a firefighter who learns about AI in a non-technical way and can generate ideas and say maybe we can use this tool in order to, I don't know when the next fire is going to happen. Stuff like that. I don't think it's that difficult, but it does seem a little far.
Yeah, but what do you think are the limiting factors? What is slowing down this adoption and this awareness?
Well, I would say there's a lot of bias, I think, towards this field because I remember when I was telling my friends, people around me, that I wanted to work in this field, I want to know more about AI. Everyone kept telling me that, oh, then it's better, it's about time that you learn how to code. But Helene, you don't like to code. How is that going to happen? I did not believe that that was the case, and you did not believe it, which really encouraged me to start in this field. But unfortunately, people have this idea that you have to be either a computer scientist or you have to be a software engineer in order to be in an AI world. But that's not the case. We are living in the AI world.
Yeah, that's the thing that frustrates me the most is that I don't think there's any technical limitation. It's mostly in people's mindsets. It's in people way of looking at the world. And that is so frustrating because I think about how many people are in your situation who they know that they will enjoy getting that career. They know that they have a passion for technology, and the only thing that stops them from having a career like yours is their own preconceptions, their or biases around how tough it actually is and about what kind of stuff they need to know. What would you say like to somebody who has your same goals and who has the same passion and has the same biases? What is a message or a word of encouragement that you think will help somebody that that is today in your situation, at least the one that you were in a few years ago?
Well, I would, first of all, what I would say is that they should not give up on this world, even though people will say that you're not a technical person, you don't know how to code, and you can't probably succeed in a world like this. It's not true. AI is for everyone and is going to be for everyone if people like us keep working in this field. And I think everyone has a potential to be in this field because it's getting bigger and bigger each day, and the career opportunities in these fields are really increasing.
So, I mean, I think that's exactly where what people should listen. I think there's also another problem though that a lot of people not only they don't think they can understand it or they think that they need to understand more than they actually need, they also don't know what they're going to practically do if they work in an industry that is technical but without being a technical person. Okay, because I mean, I think if I tell somebody, hey, you're going to be a data scientist, they can imagine a little bit that they're going to work with data, they're going to code stuff, I don't know, something like this. But it's really hard to imagine what you're gonna do if you work in tech without being a technical person. So what's your job like? What kind of activities do you do? What is that you like about your job, but what is that you maybe you think it's frustrating or that it's more hard?
Mhm. Well, what I really like, first of all, is that for me, I feel like there is no longer the language barrier. But when it comes to language, I'm talking about the technical language. Because as I mentioned before, like even a CEO or a manager of a company has problems when they have to communicate with the IT departments because they basically don't talk about the same language. But here, I really enjoy that I know that just understanding the concepts, just understanding how an algorithm works, help me communicate with those people. So in a way, you can think of it as if you know a second language, another language, because now you can reach out to these people and understand their problems and their point of view as well. So I think that's really valuable. Another thing that I really enjoy is that in this field, there's always something new, always something exciting. Like I'm following your weekly newsletters as well, which I'm sure you're not like struggling to write them because there are so many things going on all the time. You always have to be up to date, which keeps you alive, and it really excites me.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're touching on two very important points. I think a lot of people really enjoy this. A lot of people will enjoy living in a world in doing a job that is constantly evolving, that has constant news. Um, but again, it's just frustrating to think about how many just don't realize that they can get this right.
I don't think we should see it even in a way having a career or working in this field. It's not even about the field at this point. In my opinion, AI is everywhere. So even though you don't work in this field, or even though you're a teacher, you have to know about these modern technologies, about AI at this point, because your students, if you're a teacher, your students are going to know about them. Your students are going to live in a world where AI is a reality. I mean, even now, but still, it's just going to be more and more. Or for parents, their kids are going to know about them and they're not going to know about them. So I do feel like everyone, no matter what they're doing, should know it. It's not just being in working in a technical or non-technical area of AI, but in general, I think it's just something that we all should know, just like the internet, the existence of internet.
That makes a lot of sense. I was used to say that AI is gonna be like Microsoft Excel. You know, like they. I remember like maybe 15 years ago when I was a little kid, we were talking about writing your resume, and we had to write it. We knew how to use Microsoft Office, and now it's just like if you write it, they think that you're just so outdated. 'Cause obviously, you know it, right? At some point,
Like you
AI.
don't even say I speak English anymore. It's the same idea, exactly.
Exactly. So I think at some point it's gonna be the same thing, but I'm still questioning how do we get there? Because did they teach you anything about these topics I mean, the university you did?
Oh, well, not really. I would say I always, when I had the opportunity to choose elective courses, I chose like digital economy, more of these concepts, but I learned nothing technical, nothing about computer science or nothing about AI. But as I mentioned before, it is important for each subject. As I said, like we did study how modern technologies are going to affect us in international law, in EU law as well. Like there's a thing called identification of borders that is really important, or in ethics, as I mentioned, in economy. Like there is really not an area that this is not involved, does not exist, in my opinion. So that's why I'm saying it's not even just the career opportunities. If you want to live in a world where you're aware of the things around you, I think you should know what AI is, what RPA is, what do they mean, and how are they used, and maybe the impacts, and that would be enough, in my opinion.
But then you were kind of left alone though in learning these concepts more
I'm
deep, right?
actually the only person who wrote a thesis in this field, because it's not really an international relations field. I was the only one in the faculty who wanted to evaluate the effects of digital developments.
A hustler, I love it. I love it. I mean, a pioneer more than a hustler, I would say. But then, I mean, something that I've always thought about is how do you start getting passionate about this? Meaning, what created this awareness in you? What do you think contributed to this mindset that you have, and why other people, don't have it? Because we talked about why people think that they cannot get these jobs, or why they think that they cannot understand this, but the spark, the first interest, the first little push to pursue these careers and study these things, where did that come from? Because I know that for me, it came because I went to Silicon Valley. So I was in Silicon Valley and I was like, wow, this place, it's insane. Like, there's people advertising AI on the highway. But you can't ship everybody to Silicon Valley, right? It just, it doesn't work. So what was the spark for you?
Well, I think for me it was like a collection of a lot of little things, I would say, because I'm someone who has a lot of different interests, and whatever I did, I started realizing that AI just comes up in conversation or in an article that I read or a post of yours that I saw on my Instagram feed. I just started seeing it all over. And then I remember I read a book that you recommended on AI ethics. I'm probably one of your earliest followers, so I read that book, and then I realized like that was the point where I realized how a topic like ethics can be connected to AI, and then I could find these connections pretty much everywhere, which really was impressive, really exciting for me. So I just wanted to dive deeper after that point. And after that, I think it was the pandemics when I wrote my thesis, and that's when I got the AI expert course as well. And I found that really interesting because there were a lot of topics that was interesting, like the recommendation systems of Netflix, for example. Like, why wouldn't I know how that works just because I don't know how to code? There's no reason for me to not learn how that system works. So those kind of little points, I would say.
Absolutely. I mean, so it's basically about making connections. Like, I like how you said that you just realized that it was everywhere, and then, I mean, you had to jump in, right? Um, which makes me think, where do you think this is gonna go? Like for both for you professionally, where do you see yourself in 10 years? The classic stupid question they ask at interviews, right? But seriously, like, how do you think this is gonna evolve? Are you Do you think that more people are gonna get into this kind of intersection, let's say, so more people are going to start having these careers that they mix different things like you did, and so you're going to be surrounded by people like you who decided to put AI into the background? Or do you think that it's going to be something that is more niche? How do you see the next 10 years, both for you professionally and for the industry in general?
Well, I think in general it is difficult, as you said, because it's such a compact thing, AI. But I do think in 5 years, maximum 10 years, people are either going to learn it because they're going to like it and they're going to see the opportunities and they're going to be smart about it, or they're going to have to learn it because otherwise they're going to basically become dinosaurs who can't exist in the industry. Because as I said, it's not gonna matter. I talk with firms every day during these weeks, and I realize that no matter which industry, for everyone it is important. And people are seeking out for employees who are aware of these modern technologies, and if not, it's just not going to work as well. So I feel like people are either going to learn or they're going to have to learn about these. But I think that's why people like you and me we exist in this world, because I do believe that education is the most valuable thing, is the solution of each problem. And if we educate people on this now, I think in the future we can avoid the problems that we might have.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, that's why I do what I do, right? So where do you see yourself? What are your goals? What are your expectations?
It was a difficult question. No, I mean, where I see myself, I do see myself working in this field still because I do enjoy it a lot. Another thing, as I said, for me, education is a really like a personal subject as well. I do believe that I owe a lot of things to having a good education. So I think if people like us encourage other people to get started in these fields, then a lot of people are going to learn about these topics.
Yeah, so
So
you want to try to inspire other people basically to join your say.
yeah, I still exactly that's what I'm trying to say. I still want to keep trying to encourage people working in these fields and learning about these topics.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, good luck on this. I mean, I think we need more people like you that try to inspire other people. So I really hope that I'm going to, at some point, see you influence a lot of other people like you with the same kind of goals and passions. But I want to talk a little bit about actually the process. How long did it take you to, from the moment you decided, I want to understand technology, to the moment you actually got a job within the kind of industry that you were interested in? Was it a 2 years, 2 months? How long did it take, and what were the difficult things about it?
Let me think. That was actually, I would say, from the third year of university, last year of university, and until when I got my job, it was like 6, 7 months where I got super interested because at the same time I was writing my thesis and taking the courses on AI expert, and I was also working on a project for an NGO called Think Young. They have a Thinkathon that they organize every once in a while, and I was also doing a project there on education, and I was working with international people talking about how like the possibilities that AI has in education and big data in education. So I spent a good 6 months working in these fields, doing research, talking to different people from different fields. And then I think eventually, when I got my job, I started like 100% working in this field. But it did take some time.
But it's interesting because it just 7 months, you said, right?
6, 7 months, yeah.
Which is, I mean,
From the point where I got super interested and like started doing this project thesis, AI expert, and then at the end I started working.
because it's exactly what I tell people. It's funny. I was doing the math in my head. You studied 3 years,
Yeah.
your main college degree, right? Um, and then you added 6 months on top to get deeper into technology. And I was trying to make in my math, in my mind, the math. Is it actually 80/20? Like, the classic Pareto rule, right?
Yeah.
Uh, it sounds like it kind of is more or less that ratio, and that means that you didn't take your existing degree and put it in the trash can. You took whatever you had and then add that little 20% on top that kind of, I imagine it like a Lego pieces, you know? You have these foundations of knowledge of international relations and then you just put something on top,
Exactly.
you know?
Now that's really valuable. Like when you think of it, of like the career opportunities that we talked about, for someone who becomes an AI business analyst, you can work in banking, insurance, retail, mobility. Like there are so many different options. I don't feel like there is any sector that is out of this world that we can exclude.
Did you, what kind of, let's say, problems you had when you were trying to learn more about this stuff? Was it easy to find content? Was it hard to understand? Like, if somebody decided today, I want to do the same things that Helen did, I want to study for 6, 7 months, this kind of stuff, what do you think are the obstacles that this person is going to find?
I think the first obstacle for sure is going to be people around you who keep telling you that you have to learn coding if you want to be in this field. That's the main thing. Once you go past that, it's okay.
So buy some really good earplugs so that you can not listen to them, you know? And
No. And other than that, it is not that easy to find content that is not technical in AI. So I was following the weekly newsletters that you prepare. And another thing that I really appreciated, I have to mention, I don't know if you remember, but I always sent you like my questions, or like if I see a news that I didn't completely understand, you would always respond pretty quickly and like explain it to me in a non-technical way, which I really appreciated. So those are my sources pretty much, because a lot of information online seems to be on technical AI.
yeah, it's true. So I think also finding a mentor is important because what you described is basically a mentor, which is exactly what I had as well when I got started. It was my co-founder Nicolo. He's now working for Apple, and so he's in his own path in his own career. But at the beginning, we were living together in Silicon Valley, and the fact that he would just even just telling me, "Hey, study this, don't study that, because that just doesn't matter." That's just so valuable, right?
It's super helpful. Exactly. For this reason, I think it's really valuable the that you make book recommendations as well for people every once in a while, which I always followed. So yeah, it's really nice to have someone around you that tells you like this is like a good content or this is a good research point. It's really beneficial.
A lot of people told you, you're never gonna do this because you need to understand tech, etc. Was there anything at all that you struggled understanding, or was everything pretty straightforward to understand?
Well, I mean, it did take me some time to understand how big data was important for AI and how the algorithms used big data as basically food. So that was like an interesting point. It was like I remember that I thought about that for a week or so, and then one day I woke up and then I finally understood. Like making those kind of connections are sometimes difficult, and it takes a lot of research for someone like me who is not technical. Or when someone talks about Python, like I had to have a look at what it is because I didn't know before. So that's like the little obstacles you have, but it's really not that difficult. You just really have to be curious and not get discouraged by not finding the information you need at once. You just have to like keep looking.
I think being curious is super important. And I totally agree with you. Also, because as you were saying before, it's an industry that changes constantly. So if you're not curious to try to understand what's changing, what's happening in the world, then you're just going to be left behind, right? By definition.
Exactly. That could be another thing to mention here. If you're not curious, don't be in the field because otherwise it's going to be super difficult.
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, a lot. I hear a lot of people who have, let's say, normal 9 to 5 jobs. Let's just put it that way, and they complain about the fact that their job is static, so it doesn't change much. You do most of the times the same things. You progress really slowly. Whereas in this field, the fact that it constantly changes, if you embrace it, if you say, "Hey, it's constantly changing," and I am gonna keep learning, that's cool. Then it's gonna be something that constantly evolves. You're never gonna get bored. How can you get bored of something that is constantly becoming better and more advanced and more nuanced, and it's gonna penetrate more and more industries? I mean, it's I don't
It
understand.
really is an industry for long life learners,
Yeah,
lifelong learners. Sorry.
and you know what I
You
also
just have
like? I also like
hmm.
that the history is not written yet. That's something that I really did not enjoy about engineering. So when I was studying engineering, I was studying stuff that was, invented maybe 150 years before, and stayed the same because there's no. I mean, it works. It's all right. So in the end of the day, you're just studying who like stuff that old people did 100 years ago, and you're just
Ah, yeah.
learning it and applying it. But I don't have much to say about thermodynamics. It is the way it is. It is the way it is. It just we know most of the stuff that we need to know. Whereas you talked about AI ethics before. AI ethics, it's just think about this. Let's just talk about privacy. Privacy, it's an entirely new problem for humanity. Like 50 years ago, there was the concept of privacy. What does it mean, privacy? Like the people spy your phone conversations maybe 100 years ago. If you start talking about privacy to somebody 100 years ago, they will look at you like you're an alien. It's like talking about traffic lights to somebody in the Renaissance. It's just completely new, and the solution is not there yet.
That's why I think it's really interesting because these are completely new areas, completely new concerns. Because when it comes to ethics, it's like a bunch of concerns of people, and there are always a lot of theories, a lot of dilemmas that 50 other people said the same thing about, but now it's completely new. And I find it really interesting what you mentioned as well. There was a book that I read on it like a couple of months ago. It's called A Passion for Ignorance from Renata Saleh, I want to say. I'm not sure how to pronounce, but from her. And there was this concept which was super interesting. It talks a lot about how, people never want to share their private data. Like, people are really paranoid about it in a way. They don't like the idea of it. But also, on the other side, a lot of people are sharing their private life all day on Instagram, on Facebook, and they don't seem to feel as bad about it. And this book really also talks about this weird dilemma that we have, and it talks about what we choose to ignore and when we choose to ignore it. So I would recommend that if you're interested in these.
That's interesting, but it's a psychological phenomenon that I think we are studying right now. I mean, there was you probably heard about the Facebook files. I talked about it quite a bit in the last few days. So it was this big investigation around Facebook, and they found out how their algorithms impact mental health and impact society and impacts a bunch of things, really. Um, I think what is interesting about this is that a lot of people are really angry with Facebook, and rightfully. I mean, the problem here is that Facebook knew about these problems, right? So Facebook knew and decided to, it looks like, not act, because acting would affect negatively their engagement. So their money, in the end of the day, engagement is money for Facebook, right? But on the other hand, I'm thinking these are so new problems. It's so hard to find a solution to something that literally humanity has never faced before. Like, just think about this: medicine, engineering, they're all fields that are 2000 or 3000 years old. So doctors have 3000 years of experience, they're all doctors, and from Hippocrates in ancient Greek to Leonardo da Vinci drawing how the human bodies will look like. They can study how they took decisions. They've been thinking about this for a while, and engineering is the same thing. In the end of the day, like, engineering is a 3,000 years old profession. There were engineers in Egypt building pyramids, so they know how that profession looks like. So I really struggle sometimes being extremely angry at these companies. I'm angry if they find out about the problems and they don't fix them. But we have to think that we are playing with completely new tools that society, that humanity, that Homo sapiens as a species has never faced. But then the interesting thing is, who is going to solve these problems? Somebody has to solve them, right? Like the problem of, I don't know, what to do if you need to amputate a leg. That's something that we know because we has been done for hundreds of years. We know ethically how to behave. We know how to do that. We know how to talk to a patient. We know that. How do you fix an algorithm that is pushing society towards a direction that we don't like, towards, let's say, more angry, uh, divisive content? Nobody knows it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. No, I think that's why in these days there are also a lot of ongoing debates on how to regulate AI and who's going to be responsible if someone who writes a code, who writes an algorithm and uses AI to do something and that goes wrong, who's going to be responsible? And for these companies, I agree, it's really difficult because, well, first of all, these companies have a big impact, like Facebook. As you mentioned, I think a couple of days ago, like it's 3 billion people, right? It's like half of the world population. It's not that easy. But also, I mean, someone has to be responsible. So it's a really difficult area.
You know what's interesting? That to me, I think we need to put some responsibility on the people that are doing the work. So this is something that I wanna borrow from engineering. Like if I'm an engineer and I build a house and I just don't look into certain things, I don't make certain calculations, and the building falls down. It's my responsibility because I have a clear, you know, ethical guidelines I need to follow. I have clear technical checks that I need to do. I don't do them. I either go to jail or they take my license away and I can't design buildings anymore. I think the same thing should be for data science if we are talking about problems that we know how to solve. Okay.
I absolutely
There
agree.
are
Yeah.
some things we already know how to solve. We can't keep hiding behind, oh, there was a bias in the data. That's just enough of that stuff. But then there's another problem, which is some more complex problems like again the threshold between how much should I make my algorithm engaging if I know that there are going to be these other effects on society. Do you think that a data scientist can solve these issues? I think honestly people like you, people with your background, will be probably a better fit at answering these questions because I don't have that kind of mindset. What do you think about this?
Yeah, it's such a big problem as well. I do think, I mean, non-technical people should be in this technical world, but it goes vice versa as well. Like, also a data scientist should think about the consequences. But I do agree what you said. Like, I know about these because I was educated in these fields and I was curious and I was spending my days reading about these topics. But you can't really blame someone for not knowing these if they're spending their days coding all day. But that's the dilemma, that's the problem. I think that's why it's really important that there will be maybe an act from the government, maybe some law in these fields. Like, as you said, those checkpoints that are really certain in engineering are not that clear when it comes to algorithms. So it's really difficult. Someone has to find a solution to that. And that's why a lot more people should know about these problems, because maybe there is someone out there who has an idea in this, but we don't know because they think this field is really unreachable.
Yeah.
So it's really important.
But I think again, when you said someone has to do something about it, I think I want to just dig a little bit deeper into someone. Who is this someone? I don't know the name and surname of. Hopefully, maybe you are gonna fix some of these issues and gonna write, some. You're gonna pioneer some new approach to AI ethics. I hope so. But I seriously believe that the breakthroughs that we need to come from people that have a different background, from somebody who maybe has a degree in philosophy, maybe in international relations, maybe in I don't know what, honestly. But data science, I mean, we spend, as data scientists, I spend most of the time looking at data, and I spent most of my life studying about numbers and computers and these kind of things, right?
That's why I think it's really important that they communicate these two different segments, like people who are studying ethics, international relations, or engineers or managers, with people who are good at AI algorithms. There needs to be a constant communication between them.
So maybe when you said someone, maybe more than someone, the right word to use was some team of people, maybe. Yeah, but that's exciting to me because it's a problem that affects everybody, and we don't have a solution for it. And when I don't see solutions, I get excited a lot. I don't know you, and I don't know most people, but that means that there's space to move around. I don't like playing a game that I already have the solution for. Does that make sense?
I think that's why it's such an industry for curious people, for people who want to try new things. Also, as you said, I also felt the same thing when I was trying to find a topic for my thesis. When it comes to international relations, it's a lot of like history, a lot of political affairs. there are a lot of theses that is written on, let's say, the Ottoman Empire for Turkish. That's really interesting, but you can't really be super creative when it comes to the Ottoman Empire. There are some facts that you have to write on your thesis. So I really found it exciting that there wasn't really millions of books that I had to read before doing my research on these fields, because it was all new. So I was following the articles, the latest news on AI, on these kind of topics. So it was really exciting. It was really interesting. It really it gives me energy, it keeps me going.
It's awesome. I mean, I honestly have no doubts that you're gonna have a great career because I think that you have all the
Thank you.
right elements for somebody that can have a successful career in this industry because you're curious and it looks like you never stop really. It looks like you really want to dig deep into stuff and you just take all these different inputs and elements and you try to put them together in your head to form a new idea. So, I mean, I wish you the best of luck in your profession, in your even intellectual journey that you're following right now.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for taking this time, Helen. I really, really think this is gonna be helpful for a lot of other people, and it's gonna inspire so many.
I really hope so.
Awesome. Thank you. Ciao.
Okay, ciao.